Brendan, let's dive straight in. Tell us, what is cyber insurance?
Thank you, Matt. Thanks for having me. I guess in broad terms, it's insurance protection against anything that happens to do with your internet connection or anything that goes on in the World Wide Web. So I guess to break it down a little bit, there's generally three components to the insurance policy. One is what we call, I guess, the first party coverage, which is covering your own business for its own financial losses. Could be from damaged hardware because of a hack. It could be from fines and penalties from breaching data legislation. It could be any sort of ransomware payments, those type of things that the business itself will incur. The insurance policy will cover you for those losses. Then there's the third party liability aspect. So that's for third party losses. So that's where if someone suffers a loss because of your unintentional breach of data, or your system gets hacked and they use your data against you to maybe try to expose money out of another person or one of your customers through the use of their data, then they can sue you for that, and that the policy covers those third party liability claims. And then the third component is the loss of income that your business might incur as well as part of an interruption to your business for when your system is down and you're unable to trade. Those losses to your revenue are also insured under the policy.
Sure, thanks. I mean, that sounds pretty comprehensive, actually. But is that not just part of normal business insurance?
No, well, that's the misconception. A lot of the general property insurance policies have various exclusions now in their policy wordings that don't cover cyber-related losses. So that's why the development of the cyber liability policy was invented, and basically it provides that coverage around a very sort of unique area of a business's exposures to risk, which is that cyber element. There's so many moving parts to that piece that it doesn't sort of seamlessly fit under a business insurance policy or an ISR property type policy, and as well as a traditional business interruption insurance policy. They don't cover those losses related to your own IT infrastructure or the holding of customers' data and those type of exposures that the business might have.
Yeah, sure. Now, for any business owners or managers who are watching this or listening to this, there could be that sort of rolling of the eyes and, it's just another insurance premium. I mean, you've laid out what it covers. Is there anyone in particular who should consider this, or is it relevant to every business?
Look, at what I've always advised is if you've got your little blue data cable plugged into the internet and you've got devices hooked up to that, then you're susceptible to some sort of cyber loss. Basically, once you are connected to the internet, there is some element that you could get hacked, and there could be some financial losses resulting from that hack. But then as the businesses get more comprehensive, or they're a larger business and they might have a large database of client information, or they might store confidential information on hard disks, or they've got a lot of financial transactions running through internet-based websites or payment portals, or even just the use of online banking and paying your own bills, put you at risk of some sort of cyber crime situation. So ultimately, in today's age, it's pretty much every business has an exposure, and then it's really up to the business owner to assess whether the exposure is great enough for them to warrant looking at an insurance coverage or insurance protection.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, we regularly, each week we get asked by different clients, and actually even non-clients, to help them complete their business insurance questionnaire. And in particular, they're coming to us to help them answer the sort of cyber security component of that questionnaire, which in our experience has been getting longer, more complex. It's no surprise to us that some clients don't really understand the questions, or some of the questions, because we also sometimes read the questions and go, wow, okay, that's really quite specific. And it seems that the insurance companies are becoming more alert to and educated around, and specific, therefore, about the type of requirements that they have of the business owners, if they are indeed to provide even just the most basic insurance, not necessarily specifically cyber insurance per se. What's your experience with that? I mean, those are our observations. I guess a better question perhaps is, what advice would you give to business owners who are completing those questionnaires in terms of accuracy and completeness?
Yeah, well, I guess to go back to the start of the question, the reason they're becoming more detailed is basically because the insurers are seeing far more claims coming through. Cyber insurance is relatively young. I mean, it has been around for some time, probably almost 10 years, but it's beginning to get more traction as more businesses see that there is an exposure. With that traction, so more policyholders means that there's more claims coming through for the insurers. What's interesting is it's not always the fact that there's more incidents happening, but it's more the fact that these businesses now have insurance, so those incidents are now covered by insurance, and the insurance companies are paying the bill instead of the business owners, I guess, absorbing those costs historically. So with that, then the insurers are getting more data, they're getting more information from those losses. They are then able to work out, okay, well, what additional information do we need now? Do we understand the exposures a bit more in order to underwrite the risk properly, which means how do we calculate the correct premium, and what sort of coverage do we provide to each business based on their own exposures. So then that brings us back to the proposal form, which you've seen coming to you, because that's essentially what we advise as the insurance broker. We say to the business owner, there's some very technical questions in this form. A lot of them you're probably not going to know the answers to, so we recommend you send them to your IT consultants, who are the ones that are looking after your firewall protection, your VPN access, the way that your backups are managed, any sort of dual factor authentication systems that you might have in place. Well, those technical questions that a lot of business owners don't understand. So we say, look, don't guess them, because guessing the answers is more detrimental to your business than probably not even having the cover at all. So it's always important that we get the accurate information so that we can then do our job as a broker to ensure that we can negotiate in the marketplace the appropriate insurance coverage that meets the needs of that particular business based on what protection they've already got. During that process as well, we then look at advising and providing advice and liaising with their IT people around maybe increasing their security measures. And it's a real good starting point to talk about how their business is actually managing their own exposures before they take out the insurance policy in the first place. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're saying, yeah, you did, absolutely. Thank you. I mean, basically, don't wing it. If you're not sure, don't just tick the box. Ask the question. For sure. And in the same way that if you're not sure if your current insurance covers you, ask the question. There's no point living in a state of hope and then in the event you have to make a claim, then finding out that actually you're not covered for that specific thing. Or you've talked before about there being exclusions placed on policies.
Yeah.
And what, what kind of exclusions? I mean,
so I guess the thing is that, probably a common one is that if you don't have dual factor authentication, then there's possible limitations in the cover in relation to where third parties can gain access to your system and hide around in your business and check emails and those sorts of things. So they'll put limitations on the cover around that, or particularly with banking requirements. If you don't have dual authorization on banking transactions, they will exclude coverage for financial losses through internet banking transactions. So that's why if you answer yes on the form, they'll provide you with the cover, but then when you have a claim and you weren't doing it, they'll say, well, you didn't disclose that you disclosed incorrectly that you were doing it. So therefore it's what they call non-disclosure, and therefore the insurer's got a right to decline the cover, even though they had the cover in the policy, but you misled the insurer at the time of taking out the policy, so they're entitled to decline the claim on that basis. Not dissimilar from a driver not disclosing their driving history when they take out motor vehicle insurance, and then if they've got a bad history, the insurer is entitled to decline a claim because they said they have a clean history when in fact it was not clean at all.
Yeah, right. And it's safe to assume that the insurer, as they would with a driver's history, in the event of a cyber-related claim, they will check that the information you provided was accurate. The protections were in place that you said were in place.
Correct, most certainly, and particularly as the losses get larger. So if you're talking like a $50,000 claim, then the insurer is going to check all the relevant information around what you disclosed at the time, and then make a decision on that basis as to whether they'll pay the claim. So it's extremely important that the correct information is put down on the form.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned before that one of the areas of cover with cyber insurance related policies relates to fines and penalties, for example.
But
one of the areas I think is not well understood are the legal responsibilities for different types of organisations. Yeah, as you know, we focus quite heavily with Cyber Heroes on professional service providers, and by default they are handling sensitive, personally identifiable information, and often are operating above the threshold of $3 million Australian dollars turnover, and therefore have more strict requirements around how they handle the protection of that sensitive information.
Right.
Do you have any general advice for how businesses can be better educated, for any business owners or managers can better educate themselves? Because I'm guessing that an insurance company or an insurance policy will only support a final penalty if it can be shown that you've been compliant, you've taken all reasonable steps, you're compliant with the law and so on. So therefore it's really important to ensure that you are compliant.
Correct. Yeah, that's right. And I think when they're paying fines and penalties, it has to be an unintentional breach of the act or of the legislation that they're fining you under. So yes, ensuring that you're up to date with the relevant legislation under the Data Breaches Act, ensuring that you're compliant is extremely important, not just for your own business, but for insurance policy protection as well at the end of the day. So those people that are holding personal identifiable information do need to make sure that they get their heads around what their obligations are. And I think you guys for IT Basecamp have done some good blogs on that particular topic. So I'd probably recommend they reach out to the IT Basecamp website and have a look at their historical blogs and have a read up on it, because there's nice information on that.
Yeah, thank you. And we'll certainly put those links to those in the show notes below wherever you're watching or listening to this.
Fair.
When it comes to ransomware, a ransom attack, let's say, because that's certainly phishing attacks are one of the most common at the moment, at the time of recording this, one of the most common forms of attack for gaining access to a company's network. From there, the most prolific actual attack, let's say, is a ransomware attack. With regular business insurance, let's say, just to clarify, ransomware type attacks are not generally covered under just sort of normal business insurance.
Yeah, that's correct. So once again, there's a couple of policies where you may think there might be some cover under what we call fidelity cover, which is around misappropriation of funds. Generally, it's internally with regards to staff theft of money through fraudulent means, those type of things. But when it comes to a cyber hack where the cyber criminals have got in and they've stolen the money, then there's the general policies don't cover that. So it's not covered under your ordinary theft or money cover, and it's not covered under any sort of business interruption insurance. And that's why once again the cyber insurance policy sits there to cover those types of losses. Adding to the ransomware type attacks where they essentially lock up your system and ask for a payout before they release your data. There's also where they gain access to your system and sit within your network and then change the bank account details on your invoices so that you send your invoices are going to customers and they're paying the actual payment into the wrong bank account, into the criminal's bank account. So that's another very common type of claim that we see around, smaller businesses, because they do affect smaller entities where they're generally smaller amounts of maybe $20,000 or $30,000. But if you do that 3 or 4 times, then it can add up to quite a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, sometimes there's a risk that small business owners fall into the trap of thinking, they hear about cybercrime, they hear about cyberattacks like Optus, like Medibank, all the big ones, and it's just in the news. It's something you hear in the news that affects other people. The reality is a huge percentage of sort of day-to-day cyber attacks and cyber crimes actually targeting small to medium-sized businesses, which is kind of logical when you think about it, because they typically don't have the huge amount of resources that the corporations have to throw at cybersecurity and digital security. They typically don't have the team, they don't have the budget for the team, and therefore, are a more likely target, actually. They're a softer target for the cyber criminals. And as you say, it doesn't have to be a multi-million-dollar attack. It can be 5, 10, 15, 20, 50,000 done multiple times. It's very lucrative for cyber criminals. And for a lot of small businesses, those kind of attacks, they can hurt. And for some actually can be even the end even for some businesses. Not to use fear as a tactic here, when it's just a discussion at the end of the day. But you and I know locally there have been examples of $50,000 or $100,000 cyber crimes that have occurred, and for some businesses they can't stomach that.
No,
that they couldn't suffer that and survive. Let's say.
That's right. And then it's affecting. Can affect. No, you're right.
No, go ahead, please.
No, you're right. Okay.
Well, I wonder if it's a misnomer or not, but one of the things that we hear quite often is, from a liability perspective, from a protection of data perspective, is, well, all of that information, if they're doing online financial transactions using a service like Stripe, for example, which is one of the most prolific, or using a CRM like MailChimp, well, all of the data is actually contained within those platforms, so it's not my responsibility. But the customers in question have provided that information to the business owner, who is then choosing to use a platform. Is it as simple, if you outsource your merchant facilities and sort of email capabilities, is it as simple to say that you're also outsourcing your liability and responsibility?
No, it's not as simple as that. In some cases, it would depend on the SLA agreement that you've got with the host, and this goes through to backup of data as well. So backing up your system on a cloud-hosted platform. I guess ensuring that they do have some type of protection, as well as some sort of guarantee that they'll cover any costs imposed if you were to have a data breach, or if they were to have a data breach, if the hosts were to be implicated in some sort of hack or data breach. But that doesn't absolve you from your liability, as you are still the customer. The customer is still your customer. It's not your host's customer. So there is still a contractual obligation between you and your customer to ensure that any data that you take from them, that you are responsibly caring for that data and keeping it secure whether it's within your own infrastructure or with hosted third parties. So in the first instance, if those customers are going to come to you, or alternatively, in the first instance, those third parties that may not be your customer but have had some sort of financial loss because of the way you've handled the data, then they're going to come to you as well. So it's important that even though you may still be able to recover some costs from the hosts or from the third party payment platforms, that doesn't mean that it's not going to cost you an arm and a leg to try and work through the process. You'll probably need your own legal counsel to work through those things. You'll need possibly your own public relations assistance, because the smearing is going to be over your brand name. So there's a lot of components of the policy that are going to still protect you, even though it's not necessarily the case that you're going to cop the bill for the total cost of maybe recovering the data or any other sort of legal obligations that you might have in the process.
Yeah, absolutely. Not to mention the reputational damage. You could
Which
try
is
and
where
convince
we
your
didn't
clients
talk
like
about that,
Sols,
that the reputational damage is covered under the policy with there's coverage for public relations expenses. There's coverage there for a whole raft of different things that assist your business in the event of an incident occurring around the access to the forensic accountants, forensic IT professionals that can dig into IT systems to try and uncover data. So there's always third-party components to the policy that IT specialists and professionals, PR specialists that assist you and your business in the event that you are in a situation where it's going to impact on your business through some sort of data breach or hack or whatever it might be.
And that really matters. I mean, statistically, history has shown that around 30% of customers will leave. They become non-customers because of the loss of trust. And even if you're pointing and well, it wasn't us, it was Stripe, it was MailChimp, just to pick examples that people know. That's not going to wash. 30%, which is an incredible statistic, isn't it? So imagine, let's call it a third of your customers just leave. They're just go, no, I'm not comfortable here anymore, I'll go somewhere else.
And I guess that leads you to another point of the fact, that that a lot of businesses have a disaster recovery plan for a physical catastrophe, a fire or some sort of damage which renders the business inoperable. But a lot of the time they're not factoring in their IT components or a cyber threat to that. So I think it's important for businesses to look at the whole cyber threat as just as important to a possible disruption in your business, and have a plan in place as how would you react if your whole system was down, you had a brand smearing campaign due to a loss of data, those sort of exposures that your business will have now with these cyber risks. The businesses should be looking at how will they respond in the event, because you can have insurance, but you still need to have a plan in place in the event that it occurs so that you can ensure that that 30% doesn't come to your business, so that you can try and retain as many clients through some sort of strategy and how to make sure that the customers don't get too offended and you can retain as many as you can.
Yeah, absolutely. We certainly have a resource available, a free resource that's available about how to create your cyber incident response plan, which includes exactly that, disaster recovery as well as business continuity, which are subtly different things. We'll certainly put the notes to that, the link to that rather in the show notes for sure. Conscious of time, Brendan, the bottom line is, what would you suggest is the best form of protection against cybercrime? I mean, you're obviously in the business of providing appropriate insurance policies for your clients, but an insurance policy doesn't provide protection from actually being the subject of attack, does it?
No, and I guess my main advice, whether it's cyber or any insurance, is prevention is better than insurance. So you can have insurance, but going through an insurance claim is very stressful. It's difficult. It's emotionally taxing. It can break up families if it doesn't go smoothly. If you have large property losses, those sorts of things. There's a lot of pain and stress that people can feel when they go through a large loss scenario. So, like with property insurance, we talk about having sprinklers and fire extinguishers and fire alarms, smoke alarms, all these sort of things that are preventative measures to ensure that we can try and stop the loss from happening in the first place. No different to cyber insurance. I think it's important that businesses really take this seriously in relation to how do they manage the protection of these threats, and how can they put in place within their business procedures and systems to help minimise the possibility of something like a cyber hack or some type of cyber crime happening within their business. So as I said at the start, if you're connected to the internet, you should be thinking about preventative measures around how to keep your data safe, how to ensure that you've got backups and correct systems in place to ensure that you can survive in the event of an attack, or to stop it from happening in the first place. So I think prevention is always the best the best form, and then the insurance at the back end is if they do get through and you do suffer financial loss, then you know you've got the protection at the back end to pay for the bills after the unfortunate event has occurred. But that's really what the insurance is there for, is to pay for the damage after the event, not to try and prevent it from happening in the first place.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I guess we're living in interesting times, aren't we? In as much as at the time of recording this, we've all had the first taste of democratization of artificial intelligence in the form of ChatGPT, which seems is the main platform that's gaining headlines at the moment. And there's no doubt that AI, whilst it can be used for good, and predominantly is used for good, and that's its intended use, of course, unfortunately it's also accessible to the cyber criminals who can use it for bad. And that's going to have as you say, no one connected to the internet, and that's very real. We talk about phishing attacks historically. The days of, look for the bad English, look for the spelling mistakes and so on. Grammarly was already a step in that direction, which is ultimately AI powered. But ChatGPT just takes it to a whole new level. So we are revamping, we're updating our training for sure. We're updating our messaging and talking about how the context of communications that you receive is going to become more and more important. Were you expecting to receive that email or message from that person? If it needed is that person, and so on. And as you know, we're not leading with the fear-based approach at all, but we also can't hide from the reality that AI, for as amazing as it is, and it is amazing, will ultimately have an impact on the exponential growth of cyber attacks as well, and the sophistication and the smartness of those attacks, let's say, and detection will become harder and harder, and therefore the risks are ever increasing at the end of the day for all of us,
evolving.
Us included.
Yes, it's forever evolving, and it's becoming. So it's becoming one of the primary exposures of not just businesses, but even your own household. So I think the old days of being worried about locking the front door in case you got your computer stolen have changed.
So
now it's
being aware of it. At the end of the day, as you know, we're not in the business of selling insurance policies, and that's not the purpose of this podcast. But what we are trying to do is raise awareness around these topics so that business owners and managers can make more informed decisions, and trying to erode away this belief from some who just assume that their business insurance covers them for this and it'll be fine, or if they tick the box, they're not really sure, but they tick the box to say, yes, we do that in their business insurance forms. We just want to avoid, ultimately, as you know, ultimately what we're doing is helping people prevent becoming victims of cybercrime, but in the event that someone does become a victim of cybercrime, they've made an informed decision around whether they want to be insured for that, and if they do want to be insured for that, to ensure that they are completing those questionnaires accurately to avoid the rejection of a claim at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
With that said, Brendan, thank you so much for your time today. For sure, we'll be putting all of your various links into the show notes so people can reach out to you directly, which we would encourage them to do. And we look forward to chatting with you next time.